Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Bolt Gun. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint a Primaris Space Marine Hellblaster. The first colour that we're using is going to be Vallejo Model Air Chrome. I'm going to be using that to paint all the metallic parts on him. So you've got most of the Hellblaster and one of the tubes on his face. Later on I do change the colour of the Hellblaster to black and highlight it that way instead, so it's got the casing in black rather than silver. But I painted up silver first. Now the actual coils on the Hellblaster, there's a video of how to paint those, so I'll link those below and I'll also link it in the video just above here. And once we've finished all the Model Air Chrome, we'll be coming back for the next colour. So you can see the silver parts that I've done there. Now we're going to be working on Vallejo Black, using this for all the joins in his armour. As I say, we'll come back and do the casing on his Hellblaster soon enough. But you want to be careful when you're doing these not to get it over the yellow, because the yellow is a tricky colour to do. It seems to be very thin and it will show up any colours below it really easily, so try your best not to get any black over the yellow so you don't have to touch that up. Now we're going to move on to Citadel Mournfang Brown to do his pouches. So you just want to give these a nice smooth layer of Mournfang Brown. Now if you look carefully at the miniature, you might be able to see that there is a little bit of texture on it. And this is from spraying it with Citadel Averland Sunset, and it gave it that kind of powdery finish, so it is sort of grainy and gritty. And if you notice that the paint dries up really quick, because it seems to absorb it like no one's business. So once you finish this model and you look back at it, just think that it's painted over that kind of fairy powdery paint that you get sometimes using whites and yellows. Now we're going to use Citadel Rakarth Flesh. I'm going to use this to do the eagle on his chest. As I was saying about the powdery nature of the yellow that's on him, it shows that you can paint over it, you can get it to look good. I tend to use a toothbrush to just brush off any excess powdery stuff that's on him, but that still leaves it with a textured covering. But this video will sort of show you that you can paint over it pretty well without any major impact on the quality of the painting. Now we're going to use Citadel Mephiston Red. It's a very quick section this, we're just going to be using it on his eyes. Like so. Now we're using Vallejo White, and this is just to do his shoulder pad. Now, as you know, Lamenters have that nice white and black checkered shoulder pad, which is a pain to paint. So we're just going to paint this white. Obviously, if you're doing Imperial Fists, you just carry on painting this yellow like you will do the rest of the miniature, so you can skip this white bit. But for the Lamenters, you want a nice smooth white layer. So if it's a little bit streaky after the first layer, just go back, give it another couple, get it nice and smooth. Now we're going to move on to the shades, and we're going to start with Citadel Fuegan Orange. Now whereas I do splash on the shade all over everything usually, if you've watched any of the Lamenters videos, you'll know that I only put it over the areas where it is needed, so around any creases and joins in the armour, or any details. I don't put it over the whole yellow, because it's a bit of a pain to cover up. Just carry on all around his armour with the Fuegan Orange, and once it's finished and dry, we'll move on to the next shade. Next up, we're going to be Citadel Nuln Oil. We're going to be using that to do the silver on it. You may notice a couple of layers ago we've done the black casing on the Hellblaster there. So if you haven't done that because it's not been on the video, apologies. But if you can do that anytime you want, and then when we finish all the shades, we will be highlighting the black casing too. So you want to get a nice smooth layer of Nuln Oil over all the silver parts. Now I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Seraphim Sepia. I'm going to use that to do the Aquila on his chest. I'm going to paint this in the same way as Bone. I will be doing a video of just how to paint Bone on its own, which rhymes quite badly. I'll be doing a video to how to paint Bone in a few weeks, I would have thought. Possibly next week, depending on how much time I get to paint. Now I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Agrax Earthshade. We're just going to use this on all of the brown. So all of his pouches are getting a good coating of Agrax Earthshade. You're going to make sure there's some around the edges, not going onto the yellow though. Try and keep it as much as possible onto the brown of the pouch. Like so. And the final shade that we're going to use is Citadel Druchii Violet, and that's just to do his eye lenses. Like so. Now we're going to return to the base colours and we're going to start reapplying Averland Sunset. Now when you're painting this on initially, it does take probably the longest time to do for all of the layers on this figure. That's just because you may have to do a couple of layers over where the Fuegan orange has gone onto the armour, and just spend some time going around the details, because you don't want to obviously fill in those details with the Averland Sunset either. So take your time with this one, get it a nice smooth yellow base coat back. If it is the odd streak, it doesn't matter too much, we can touch that up with highlights and things later on. As long as most of the Fuegan orange is nicely coated and only visible in the recesses like you can see here. Now we're going to move on to Citadel Yriel Yellow, and this is going to be the first layer of highlights. When you're putting the yellow on, you want to think about where you're applying it and only apply it to the areas that will be catching the light. So if you're looking down at the top of the model, the areas that will get the light from that. You don't want to be painting the underside of his arms or the underside of his armour with the Yriel yellow. You just want to try and keep it to sort of maybe the top half of his pauldrons and that kind of thing too. Then when we come back now with the Citadel Flash Gitz, we're then going to be just doing one final highlight on this and only doing the very top edges of the yellow. Now if you look at his pauldron on his right arm, you can see where the previous layer has only gone over about half of that. You can see that just there, the line going diagonally across it. So that's the kind of thing that you want to be doing over all his armour. So it's only the top edges getting the most highlights. The final yellow that we're going to use, we're going to mix a little bit of Vallejo White with the Flash Gitz yellow. And then we're just going to do very edge highlights on the top edges of things that will be catching the light. So again, those edges on the underside of stuff aren't going to get highlighted. It's only going to be the edges that will be catching the light from above. Once those are done, we'll come back with the next layer. Next up, we're going to use a little bit of Vallejo German Grey, which is a lovely dark grey colour. I'm going to be using this to highlight his Hellblaster. The casing on his Hellblaster anyway. So you want to be doing all the top surfaces of it and all the edges where the light will catch it. You can tell when I'm putting the paint on here that it is getting absorbed really, really quickly. That is down to the fluffy textured paint from where the spray can went a bit wonky and left it a little bit dusty. I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel dry paint, Necron compound. Just going to use this just to go over all the metallics. This just brings out a nice highlight and a nice shine to them all. See all the top edges there that have caught it. So you're just going to do that on all of these edges. I'll just bring out a nice edge highlight to all of the parts of the Space Marine. They're silver. Now we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Mechanicus Standard Grey. This is just to do the final highlights on his Hellblaster. So it's literally just the edges where it's going to be catching the light. So take your time doing these edges. You do want a nice thin line of the Mechanicus Standard Grey if you can get it. Sometimes you won't and you'll end up with a little bit wider in some parts or a little splodge here and there. Don't worry about that too much, it's just the general line that you're trying to get on there just to really show the detail on that gun. I'm going to move on to Citadel Rakarth Flesh again and start working on his Aquila. So depending on how your Rakarth Fleshes, mine's become a bit thin in recent times because it doesn't mix quite as well as it used to, so I sometimes have to do a second layer of this to get it looking smooth. So if you see me going over the same part a couple of times, that's why. But again, you can see how quickly the paint's absorbed due to the textured effect. Next up, we're going to add a little bit of Citadel Ushabti bone to the Rakarth flesh. I'm going to do the first layer of highlights on the Aquila. On these parts, I tend to get the next highlight onto maybe the end 3/4 of each one of the kind of feather areas. That's just to make the whole thing stand out a little bit more. It's not really how I do the rest of the model, but it does make the Aquila stand out a little bit better. Now we're going to mix some Citadel Ushabti bone to the previous mix, just to lighten that up again, give it a bit more of a bone colour. And you're probably going to be highlighting maybe the end half of each one of the feathered areas. Like so. As a final highlight, we're going to add a little bit of Vallejo White to the previous mix. We're just going to do the very tips of all the feathered areas. Like so. Now we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Mournfang Brown. I'm going to reapply this to the pouches. So you want to be leaving the Agrax Earthshade in the recesses, and where the pouch sort of curves inward, you want to try and leave some of it in there as well. So it's a nice quick layer to paint this one. Like so. Next up, we're going to add a little bit of Citadel Rakarth Flesh to the Mournfang Brown. We're just going to be highlighting the corners and the edges of all these pouches to give them a worn look. That's just to give them that scraped leather look, where the leather underneath is a lighter colour than the leather on top. Now we're going to add a final little bit of Rakarth Flesh to the previous mix and just do slightly less highlights on the edges, just to give nice scuffs to those corners. like so. Now you can see here I've drawn onto his shoulder pad with the checkerboard for the Lamenters chapter badge. I'm going to use Vallejo Black to start filling that in. Now it is just a case of filling in one square with the black and leaving the other one white. As I start going here, I get about 3/4 of the way through of painting the whole shoulder pad, and then I actually start repainting it again because I made some of the parts thicker and thinner than the others. So when you're planning out those lines and doing the checkerboard effect with a pencil, you just want to make sure that you get them all nice and even. I tend to do the two outside edges as like the same thickness all the way up, and then as you're getting further into the middle of the pauldron, I'm making them slightly thinner as they get towards the top. Now, that's not what I've done here, so when it comes back on you'll see that I've actually done the checkerboard again and sorted them out to how I usually do them. So you can see there, they're slightly different, but now we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Mephiston Red to do the heart on it. Now I did struggle doing the heart on the shoulder pad, and that's mainly down to the textured paint from the yellow, which I do keep mentioning, but every time you're trying to do a thin little layer or a thin little line, it takes the paint off your brush and dries it so quickly that it really does make a difference to how you're applying the paint. So this does start going on a little bit rough, but as time goes by it does start to take shape properly. A little bit of a slow down here, so you can see just taking your time to do these edges and to do the curves on the top of the heart and try and get them even. If you get one side looking a bit different, just even it out with the other side, and you can touch up with white afterwards. Next up is Vallejo Black. I'm just going to add a little tiny teardrop to the bottom left of the heart. You can hear any noise there, that's the cat shredding my chair. Now we're going to go into a Citadel Mephiston Red, and we're going to work on its eye lenses. I will be doing a little tutorial on how to do eye lenses at a later point, but there's a nice little quick one for when you paint your miniatures. Like so. Next up we're going to add some Vallejo White to the Mephiston Red, and we're going to start highlighting those. Now you're doing the back lower end of the eye lenses with that. You're just putting a nice little streak of that down the far side. We're going to add a little bit more white to that previous mix, and we're going to do about half of that little area again using this new colour. Like so. Now add in another bit of white to the previous mix, just to get that highlight done. I'm just using this in the very bottom edge of the lens on each side. Like so. And now we're just going to use a little bit of pure Vallejo White to do the spots on his eye lenses. One on the front at each side, and then a tiny little line down the underside of each side. Like so. Now to finish off those lenses, I'm going to use a tiny little bit of Citadel gloss varnish just to coat each of those lenses. Now I started applying it with a really thin brush, which doesn't work quite as well. So what we want to do is use a slightly bigger brush to add a little bit more of the gloss varnish to the lenses, and that just smooths them out, gives them a nice reflective shine. Next we're using a little bit of Citadel Warpstone Glow, and that's going to be to do his company markings on his kneecap. Now this is just going to be the company colour, so it's green for the 4th company, as they are pretty much codex standard. For the rest of it, he's going to have his company markings there rather than on the trim of his shoulder pads, and he's going to have his squad type and squad number on his right shoulder pad, like most codex chapters. So he's a fire support squad, so his shoulder markings are going to be black, so it stands out on the yellow, and it's going to be an inverted V in just pure black. Now again, this suffers with the same problem of the texture on the paint absorbing what you're painting on really quickly. So it does take a while to paint this on. Again, and as always, before painting on any kind of detail or any kind of pattern, you want to be drawing them on with pencil. Now I'm going to use Vallejo White, and that is to do the number 8 for the 8th squad. Now this white has been in the wet palette for quite some time, so it's thinned down a bit. So when there's little breaks here, that's me looking for a slightly thicker bit of paint to use. I'm just marking out where the joins are on the 8 there and where it crosses over the white line down the middle. So I'm going to paint this initial layer on, and then I'm going to go over the white to thicken it up again, and also go over the black just to smooth out the edges of the white if it's got a bit of a lump to it. When you finish that, that is the Lamenters Hellblaster Marine finished. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media linked below. Thanks very much.